Hey everybody, Samuel Allred here. Welcome back to the Persistence Outdoors podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm excited as we get deeper into 2025 to help more people get outdoors and into hunting. And you listeners who support the show, whether you're longtime hunters or are brand new to hunting, you're all a part of that. So I want to thank you, and I hope you'll come away with something useful from this episode. Today, we're going to tackle a subject that was requested by a listener and friend of mine, and that is learning your hunting regulations and how to break down all the information that's thrown at us. The units, the hunter's orange requirements, licenses, tags, permits, fees, all of that. Now, this can be a pretty dense topic for sure. So I've broken it down into a step-by-step fashion that I think will be a little easier to follow along with, and we'll get to that in a moment. First, though, I want to give you a few scenarios to set the scene for today's topic and maybe motivate you to really dig into those regulations before you hunt. Here's a few scenarios that could be punishable violations depending on the regulations in your area. See if you can figure out what's going on in each scenario. So, scenario number 1, you and your buddy are out elk hunting, and your buddy kills a nice 5-point bull elk. Now comes the hard part, right? Breaking it down and packing it out. So, you grab your knife and you get to work with your buddy. Once you guys have field dressed and skinned the elk, you volunteer to start with the first load back to the truck while your buddy continues breaking it down. He agrees, he thinks that's a good deal, so you grab a quarter, you put it in your pack, and you start back to the truck. Pretty simple scenario, right? Let's look at scenario number 2. You're sitting in a duck blind with 3 friends. You've had a great day so far. In fact, you've limited out, but none of your friends have got their limit yet, so the hunt continues. You're not the best caller, but you want to make yourself useful, so you start plucking birds. You take your time and you do a meticulous job. There's not a feather left. Okay, that's scenario number 2. Again, it seems like you're just being helpful, right? Here's scenario number 3. This might be a little bit more obvious, so here it is. Before turkey season, you bought a tag for yourself and a tag for your son. You hunted together the first 2 mornings of the season. You killed a nice gobbler, but your son got way too excited and somehow managed to miss his. Because of school and sports, your son probably won't get out hunting for the rest of the season. You're itching to get out again, though. You bought the tag, you think, and your son's not going to use it. Plus, there's plenty of turkeys. You might as well go out and get another one with your son's tag. Okay, so those are the 3 scenarios. Number 3 might be a little more obvious than the first 2, and I'm not going to give you the answers quite yet, but in each of those scenarios, like I said, you're potentially breaking the law. I just bring these up to emphasize it's your responsibility to read the hunting regulations and become familiar with them before setting out on a hunt. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we get into it, as always, please follow the show and give it a 5-star rating. It will help the show grow and reach more people. And of course, if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend. All right, so if I were hunting in a new state or hunting a new species, there's 7 general steps that I would follow. Step number 1, get a regulations pamphlet. Step number 2, determine the species I want to hunt. Step number 3, find out what unit I would be hunting in. 4 is determine the seasons. 5 and 6 are kind of similar, but 5 would be buy the appropriate license and pay the fees. 6 would be buy the appropriate tag. And then 7 would be get clarification from a wildlife officer if needed. Your steps may look a little different, and you don't have to go in this exact order, but when we walk through it, it's a good way to cover all the things like hunter's orange requirements, licenses, private and public land, etc. I'll also explain the 3 scenarios I laid out in the intro as we get to the appropriate steps. So the first thing I would do if I were in a new state or hunting a species I hadn't hunted before is get an official hunting regulations pamphlet for the state. State Fish and Game agencies will publish a pamphlet with all the rules and regulations you need to know to get out hunting. And you can find this online as a PDF, or you can find it in a sporting goods store like your Cabela's or Bass Pro Shops or Sportsman's Warehouse. And you can find the actual physical pamphlet printed, and they're usually free at the sporting goods store. When you're just starting out, I would recommend getting a physical pamphlet because you can use it to reference at any time. You can keep it in your car. If you don't have cell service, you can just flip through it. So if you're starting out, go ahead and get a physical pamphlet. And what you need to do is find the general rules section. These pamphlets are usually split up into different categories. So you might have a small game pamphlet and a big game pamphlet, or you might have a migratory bird pamphlet. So pick up the one for the species that you want to hunt, and then find the area. It will usually be either in the front or in the back that just has general hunting rules. And go ahead and read through all of those. It might sound like homework, but these rules are going to apply to all of your hunting, right? So it's important to be familiar with them. And once you read them once or twice, you'll remember a lot of them and you won't have to keep going back to the book. In this section, you'll find all sorts of helpful information. So you may find information on what type of weapons you can use. There's often restrictions on the caliber you can use for certain animals. A lot of states say for big game, the smallest caliber you can use is a .243 caliber centerfire rifle. You might have turkeys or birds, and this section will say that you can only use a shotgun. Different things like that. So that's where you're usually going to find your weapons restrictions. You may also find information about hunter's orange requirements. For some animals in certain seasons, and it differs from state to state and season to season, right? But for some seasons, you will be required to wear a certain number of square inches of hunter's orange. And usually you'll be able to find that out in this part of the rules pamphlet. You'll also find information on where shooting is restricted. In the state of Idaho, you're not supposed to shoot across traveled roads. That makes sense, right? We don't want people hitting cars. So common sense things like that, but there may be certain restrictions on how far from a road you can shoot. There may be restrictions on where you can shoot in relation to buildings, which is especially important if you're on private land or hunting close to private land. And then in the section, you'll also find the time of day that you can hunt animals. Usually it's 30 minutes before sunrise to 30 minutes after sunrise, but it could be different, and you can find all of that in the rule book. Once you've gone through the general hunting regulations and you've got an idea of what's legal and what's not, now think about the species that you want to hunt. And maybe you already have this in mind, but again, these steps don't have to go specifically in order, but this is the way we'll walk through them. In these pamphlets, there will usually be a section or a page on a certain species. We'll use white-tailed deer as an example because it's just ubiquitous with North American hunting, right? So find the page for the species you want to hunt, in this case, white-tailed deer, and read that page. On this page, you'll find information like species identification tips, bag limits, class and gender harvest rules. So let's walk through these. Species identification tips. If you live in an area that has multiple kinds of deer, it's important that you know what kind of deer you're shooting, right? Some places like Washington have black-tailed deer, mule deer, white-tailed deer. So it's important to be able to differentiate those so you know you're harvesting the right animal. And often in these regulation pamphlets, they will have tips on how to identify your species and how to differentiate it from other species. You'll also have bag limits, which is the number of animals you can shoot in a day. With deer, that's usually just going to be restricted by the number of tags you have for the deer, which we'll talk about in a bit. With other animals like ducks or birds, it may be a bag limit of, say, 7 birds, and then you have to be done for the day. You've limited out. You'll also have rules on the class and gender of the animal. So when I say class, I mean something like a regulation that says you can only shoot a white-tailed deer that has 3 points or more on one side. Or it might be a gobbler, a turkey that has a beard that is 4 inches or longer. So sort of the class of animal and also the gender. Some places you might have a antlerless deer season where you can shoot only deer that don't have antlers. Or you might have a place that you can shoot either. You will find that all in this section of the pamphlet, the regulations pamphlet. You can also find out what needs to be harvested from each animal. Some states require you to take 4 quarters, the back straps, and the tenderloins from an animal or from a deer. That's pretty standard, but it's not this way with all animals. For example, here in Idaho, you don't have to take the meat from a bear that you kill. It's kind of surprising. I actually wish it was required that you take the meat, but you don't have to, and you could just take the hide. So you'll find that information in this section as well. You'll also be able to tell whether you need certain permits. This information could be in this section. It could be in other sections, but we'll go over it here. You might need an archery or muzzleloader permit if you're hoping to hunt in one of those seasons. Or if you're hunting something other than big game, if you're hunting, say, birds, ducks, right? You might need a migratory bird permit. If you're hunting upland game, you might need an upland game permit. This all varies from state to state. So you're going to have to read the regulations, and usually in this section, you'll have some indication of what type of permits you might need. Often the species section will also give you an idea of the transport rules, how you need to treat the animal or the meat after you've made the harvest and got it to your truck, or even getting it to your truck. And this is where the elk and duck hunting scenarios that we talked about come in. In the elk hunting scenario, when you pick up a quarter and walk back to the truck with it, and it's a little ways away and you're now out of contact with the person who killed the animal, right? You could be violating the law if you don't have a proxy statement. A proxy statement is a little slip of paper that the person who killed the animal fills out with their name, their license and tag information. And it basically says that this person who is carrying part of my animal is authorized to do so. But if a warden found you with just a quarter of an animal and no documentation for it, you could get in trouble because you don't have that proxy statement from the person who had the tag for the animal. In the duck hunting scenario, it's a little bit different. Many states have a regulation saying that if you're plucking a bird and you're going to transport it, you need to leave a fully feathered head or a fully feathered wing so that wardens can identify the bird. And again, in that scenario, if you're plucking animals while your buddies are hunting, it sounds like you're just being nice, right? You're doing a good thing, helping get ahead on the work. But if you've plucked it completely, it could create a situation where you can't identify the bird anymore, and that could be a violation in the field. Now, again, it varies from state to state whether you need proxy statements or you need to leave a fully feathered wing or head, so you will have to read your regulations pamphlet. The species section will also likely tell you whether you need to report the animal. Say you are hunting white-tailed deer in a CWD positive area, your Fish and Game Agency may have created a way to check for that, and basically all hunters have to bring their animal to a checkpoint to get tested for CWD. That's chronic wasting disease, for those of you who are unfamiliar. So that's all information that you will likely find in the species section of your rules pamphlet. It's very valuable information, and if you don't know it, you could be in violation of the law. So it's important to know before you go out hunting. Now, some animals you won't find a specific species section for. Let's use coyotes, for example. Some states aren't going to list coyotes as a game animal. You may find a different part of the rules pamphlet where it says coyotes are a predatory animal and they can be hunted basically without very much regulation. There's often animals like coyotes and jackrabbits that are listed in a different place because they're not really regulated the same way as these more popular animals to hunt are. And so you may have to look somewhere else if you're not finding a specific section for the animal you want to hunt. The third step in this process is to figure out what unit you will be hunting in. So in these regulations pamphlets, there will be a map that shows your state and shows the breakdown of the different units in the state. The state will be divided up into any number of units. Some it's as few as 6 or 4 even. They might be called zones instead of units. Other states have hundreds of units, right? And they can even be a little bit different depending on the species. So make sure you know what species you want to hunt before you determine the unit you're hunting in. But they will have the state in the pamphlet cut up into units, and you can look on the map and see what unit the area you want to hunt is in. For example, you might know you are going to hunt your uncle's farm, and you look on the map and you see that it's in Unit 1. That narrows down the regulations that you need to pay attention to. You only need to look at the regulations for Unit 1 as long as you know you're only going to hunt in Unit 1. Or like I said, it might be called a zone. It might be Zone C. So just pay attention to that, and that will help you start narrowing in and focusing in on what's important for you to know without having to read the entire rule book. During this step, it's helpful to determine what type of land you will be hunting on. A major distinction is whether you're hunting on public or private land. There's sometimes, depending on the species, there will be different regulations for hunting on public or private land. And almost across the board, for hunting on private land, you will need some sort of authorization from the landowner. Some states will require actual written consent from the landowner. So you should be clear on whether you're hunting on public or private land. And if there's an area you want to hunt and it's private and you can't get permission, then you're not going to be able to hunt there. Once you know if it's public or private land, you can break it down even further. So you could have public land that is National Forest land or Bureau of Land Management land, BLM land. Or it could be in a special area designated by the state for hunting or recreation that has special regulations. It's not enough to just know whether you're on private or public land. You really need to know one step further what you're hunting on. And just FYI, it's not always a bad thing if the area you want to hunt is private. There's a lot of people who will let you hunt if you ask them, or there may be ways where you can get a permit to hunt, or there's certain programs where people make a deal with the state where the state essentially leases private land to allow the public onto that private land. So don't be discouraged. Once again, it's just important to know. The way that I know all the time is by using OnX Hunt. It's a GPS mapping app you can get. I think the base subscription is about $35 a year. If you want to know more about using mapping apps to determine the land type that you're on and public and private land boundaries, go and listen to episode 4, Using Mapping Apps for Hunting, and I explain all about it. Once you know the species you want to hunt in the unit you're hunting in, now you can determine the season. The season is just the time frame in which you can hunt the animal legally. You might have a white-tailed deer hunting season that runs from mid-November to the 1st of December, something like that. The seasons are often broken up by weapon. They will be different by unit, and sometimes seasons can start and stop and then start again. So you will want to pay attention to all of these nuances for the unit and for the animal that you're hunting. Usually in the regulation pamphlets, you will have a species and there will be kind of an overview page. And then after that, it will break down all the different seasons for that species, usually broken down by unit and by weapon. So if you are hunting with archery equipment, you'll likely hunt a different season than if you were hunting with a rifle or with a muzzle loader or something like that. There may also be differences in the seasons for antlered versus antlerless deer, for example. If you live in an area that has lots and lots of deer, maybe the antlerless season will go longer than the antlered season. Make sure to just get into the charts, find your unit, find your species, the weapon you're going to be hunting with, and just drill down on exactly when you're allowed to hunt. This is a good time to look at other units as well if you want to. If you realize you can't hunt when you want to hunt in your unit, you could look at a different unit and there may be an open season there when you're available. Another thing you can do is look at which seasons line up. In some places, you can hunt multiple species at the same time. For example, when I lived in Tennessee during the fall archery deer season, you could also hunt turkeys with archery equipment. If you're in a place where you can hunt multiple species, it's nice to know while you're out there and have more opportunities to kill an animal. Step number 5 in the process is to buy the appropriate license and permits and pay any fees. At this point, you should know all you need to know to get the right license. You can often buy licenses online these days, or you can buy them in person at a sporting goods store. The same place you can pick up a regulations pamphlet, you can also likely buy a hunting license. One of the main things you want to know when buying a hunting license is whether you're a resident or a non-resident. It's usually pretty simple. If you don't live in the state, you are probably a non-resident, right? But there are different residency requirements for different states. So you'll want to make sure that you meet the residency requirements, just like when you're trying to get a driver's license or something like that. You'll have to meet the residency requirements to get a resident license. The big difference here is a price difference. Usually non-resident licenses are going to cost a significant amount more than resident licenses. Now, there's licenses, permits, and fees. Licenses are often broken up into small and big game licenses. So if you're hunting small game, say you're hunting ducks, you would just need to get a small game license. Or if you're hunting deer or elk, you might only get a big game license. There is a page in the regulations pamphlet that is going to lay this all out. And it should show you how much it will cost. It should show you different packages. You might be able to get your small and big game license at the same time. Some states aren't going to have that distinction. It's just going to be a hunting license for residents. If you don't know which license to get, you can often, again, look it up online and there may be more clarification, or ask someone at a sporting goods store and they often can help you as well. Once you've bought your license, you may also need certain permits. We touched on this earlier. Permits are usually more specific than a license, and they won't apply to all hunters who have the previous license, right? You could be a big game hunter but not need a bear baiting permit or not need an archery permit. One permit that is especially common if you're hunting migratory birds is the migratory bird permit. The money for this permit goes towards migratory bird conservation. And you'll also need something called a migratory bird stamp, which isn't really a permit, it's just something special. Other permits include GMU permits. A GMU is a game management unit, and some game management units will require you to buy a permit to hunt on that game management unit as opposed to other types of public land. You may also have to pay fees. Fees are usually one-time payments, not always, but they're often one-time payments, and they go to fund a certain project. For example, one common fee is an access fee. Usually the money goes to the state and helps the state keep access points open and make deals with private landowners to help there be more access for hunters. You may also pay an application fee if you are applying for a special hunt, which brings us to our next step, buying your tag. Tags are just a receipt that you receive saying that you have paid for the privilege to hunt an animal. And usually you will take that tag and actually attach it to the animal once you've killed it. There's two main types of tags: over-the-counter tags and tags that you receive through a drawing. Over-the-counter tags are just like they sound. They can be bought with your license and permits at any given sporting goods store as long as the quota hasn't been met. Some have an unlimited number of tags that can be bought. They're usually for species that have abundant populations. Then there's tags that you can only get through a special drawing. And these tags, you have to enter for them ahead of time, and then your name will be picked out of a hat, and you, if you're picked, will get the privilege to hunt that animal. These special drawings can get a little bit complicated. Sometimes you need to pay an application fee, like I mentioned, to get into the drawing. Sometimes there's a point system for applications where if you apply but aren't picked, you will get some points for having applied, and it gives you preference the next time that you apply. Oftentimes, units that require a drawing can have better quality of animals, maybe older or bigger animals in the units, because there's more control over how many people are hunting the animals per year. Now, while we're on tags, let me explain the turkey hunting scenario that I talked about in the very beginning, where you have bought a tag for yourself. You also bought a tag for your son, but your son's not going to use it. So you decide, hey, I paid for this tag. I'm going to go ahead and kill a turkey and use my son's tag. In most states, if not all states, that is illegal. It is something that has traditionally been a practice in some places, and you might know people who have done it. But just so you're aware, if you buy a tag, it is not transferable unless otherwise noted. It's not like a concert ticket or something where they just want to know someone's filling the seat. It is important that the person who holds the license is the one harvesting the animal. All right, so let's recap where we're at. You've got your regulations pamphlet. You've read through the general hunting regulations, the regulations for your species. You've chosen your unit and you've found a season. And now you've bought your licenses and your tags. You're pretty much good to go at this point. But if there's something that in the regulations pamphlet or online, if there's something that you can't figure out, just give your state fish and game agency a call. And that's my 7th step. When in doubt, give them a call. They're usually happy to help. They should know the rules better, and they can help you clear up anything that seems confusing. I also like emailing the state game agency because then I can get something in writing. So if something in the rule book seems confusing to me, I will often email them so then I can have a written response from the state game agency in case that scenario were to happen and I need to show it to a warden or someone like that. You can find the state fish and game agency number on the internet, their email also on the internet, and you can even go into an office if you want to talk with someone face to face. I think this is an important step because the regulation pamphlets are dense. You could miss something, and sometimes there's things that just don't quite make sense to you and you just need another opinion. So go straight to the source and get that cleared up. All right. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you. I know how overwhelming it can seem at first, but it really is important to read the regulations. Not just because if you don't follow the regulations, you could face fines or lose your hunting privileges, which would suck, but it's also our duty as citizens to follow the regulations. And often these regulations are put in place for a purpose, conservation related or otherwise. Also, you should remember that hunters are under pretty intense public scrutiny. So anytime a hunter does something criminal or dishonorable, it's a mark against the whole hunting community, and it makes it harder for us to keep our hunting privileges, which can be taken away. I'll wrap up with this. Just get started. It will be a lot of information at first, and it may seem confusing, but once you've gone through the whole process for a single species, you'll have built a contextual framework that will make everything else easier to decipher. Soon, it won't seem as tricky. Keep a pamphlet on hand for reference, and then get out and hunt. That's all for today. I'll catch you next week.